Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon it's a Tuesday, so I'm joined by Lawrence Conley and Liam Carrigan, dialing in all the way from Japan. How are you guys after that weekend of ups and downs, the topsy-turvy world of this Celtic title race? Over in Japan, what time is it just now, Liam? You just getting settled down for the night?
Yep, it's 9:30.
9:30 at night over in Japan. We're going to be hearing from...
Dive into this Celtic thing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Plenty to dive into. Lawrence, it looks like your home bar is taking shape in the background as well.
Yeah, it's a bit, mate. It's coming along. Yeah, be open time for St. Patrick's Day. So I'm not too sure, mate. I'm thinking either Barra St. Tiernick's or maybe the Farnley Arms.
Why not throw it out to the comments? Look at some of these great ideas we get from the commenters. Yeah, I've got to say, Jungle Lion first in, bit late, PJ. Sorry, I've normally got the stream ready to go at about 12 o'clock. I was running a wee bit late today. Celtic follower, afternoon to you as well. Now, yesterday we spoke about backing the... sorry, Paddy, about time. Backing the manager when it came to the comments he made after the game. So let's have a wee chat about your thoughts around the weekend's fixtures. Liam Carrigan, I'm going to start with you. What was your take on Celtic getting that opportunity, failing to take it, and all the circumstances in between? Liam might not be able to hear us. He might not be able to hear us. Lawrence, I'll throw that one over to yourself, mate.
Yeah, look, obviously you're delighted on Saturday. I was at a Tommy Gemmell statue fundraiser on Saturday night. Everybody, in high spirits after the result. Kick off Sunday morning doing one of Matthew Marr's Celtic tours. 30th anniversary of Fergus McCann, and then watching it in the Connells. And I thought Celtic's penalty was soft. Thought it was a penalty. He'd has missed one. He wouldn't be a Celtic penalty taker without that. But it's nothing in the sending off. Absolutely nothing. You're thinking, yeah, it's a yellow. There's nothing more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Missing a penalty is almost an initiation for a Celtic attacker these days, Lawrence.
Yeah, totally. And you always fear when John Beaton's involved with a Celtic game. Let's be honest.
Right, Lawrence, can I ask you, for anyone tuning in who doesn't know why, go and just explain it in layman's terms. Why are you concerned when you see the officials announced and beaten? Because this seems to be going over a lot of people's heads, including the authorities of Scottish football.
If it goes way back to, even look at Albion Rovers, the time at Ibrox when they were playing in the Cup. Was it Mosley just bundles the keeper into the net? Mm-hmm. Body checks him into the net and Beaton gives a goal. He's got, let's say, a long track record of highly controversial decisions that favour Rangers. And it's rumoured that he's a Rangers fan. He thinks it's appropriate to drink in Rangers pubs after given decisions in favour of Rangers. But we have a supporters club named after him, such as his
affiliation,
apparent leanings towards him. And listen, there's a number of strange decisions that seem to appear, his preferred team. And for the authorities to say there's nothing strange there, there is something odd. It's the sheer number that he gives just seem to be inexplicable. Well, and it's towards the team he supports. You're not asking anything outrageous, saying it. Celtic, listen, any chance that we don't have Rangers fans refereeing us? We're not asking for what Rangers getting Rangers fans refereeing them. We're not asking for Celtic fans to referee us. We're just saying any chance it's not Rangers fans. Certainly one that either appears to be either completely incompetent. Some people, not me, would speculate that he's a cheat. But there are some people that have christened him cheating, beaten, but certainly not me.
Listen, Lawrence, on that note, right, you're talking about a set of facts. We spoke about it yesterday. Scottish football's not very good at looking at facts, though. I mean, people argue against clubs going into liquidation. Rangers must be the only team in the world who survived liquidation, and all of a sudden, the narrative gets skewed to such a point where there's so many people believe the made-up version of being demoted and all this kind of stuff. The fella in question was in a Rangers boozer. Why on earth would you go in on match day into a Rangers pub and drink in amongst Rangers fans, unless you were a Rangers fan yourself. Now, Ian Conroy, during that introductory conversation that Lawrence and I were having, you have dialed in from New Zealand. Welcome to you, sir. I noticed that you've got fish on your wall behind you. Lawrence has got a bird. Liam, what you got? You got any animals behind you? Or is it all Batman and stuff like
that? It's funnily enough, Batman's the one I don't have on the wall. Actually, I've got Superman and a few others, but no, that's all my signed photos, all my collection of autographs that I've picked up over the years.
Nice. Well, as you might have guessed, Acsom over the last wee while has moved studios and a much smaller space now. Nice and cosy, but I don't have space for a lot of the gear that we had in the old space. And talking of signed memorabilia, there's a lot of stuff going to be chucked on the Acsom eBay page for auction, and all the items for the Jamie Tierney Fund as well will be on there. So check it out. I'll be sure to add a wee link underneath this video. Ian, welcome back to the show. It's always a pleasure to see you. We're going to get Liam's take on the weekend's events. What was your take from afar? You know, Celtic having that wee gap opening up and then failing to capitalise on it.
It was almost written in the stars for me. It was kind of like, you know, I listened to For My Sins, Clyde Super Scoreboard over here when I'm sort of cooking and making the dinner and things like that. My little sort of we sort of feed back to home, and you know, Brendan talked about a narrative in his interview after the game, and it's like it's clear, obviously from afar. You know, we're talking about from afar. The narrative is always know Rangers are coming. Actually, outright saying it, or sort of you know, the innuendo that they're coming. So it seems that it's a gleeful kind of opportune, you know, kind of Schadenfreude, you know, whenever Celtic don't do particularly well. So after the result against Dundee, you know, it looked like would finally clicked after, you know, so long into the season. You know, we finally clicked. You know, the wingers were doing what they should be doing. You know, and you know, we scored. It was scintillating football. You know, it was back to the way it should be, but for one game only. And I'm not really a pessimist, but I felt pessimistic for going into the Hearts game, and it was kind of, it proved to be right. You know, the decisions aside, you know, we missed the penalty. You know, if that had gone in, you know, it would have been a different scenario. But I don't want to keep relying on the fact that, you know, we're being hard done by. We know we're going to be hard done by at certain times, but we've got enough in our locker to be able to sort of counter that, you know, and we still didn't do it, you know, despite the fact we played pretty well. I'm glad that Brendan came out sort of punching, but he's almost making excuses again, you know. It's like something to hide behind. But the take out from that for me is, and I said it in the group chat before, it was like, if all else fails, this hopefully now galvanizes the team, the fans, the board. We collectively come together and say, right, we've got 10 cup finals left. Let's just concentrate on ourselves and win every game. That's what we have to do, you know. But yeah, in answer to the question, sadly, I thought we might have slipped up, and obviously we did.
Well, on that note then, because that does give a good take on the other side of that, which is obviously taking advantage of a situation and running with it. You know, I'm not saying making excuses, Ian, but obviously what you're doing is focusing on the performance itself. Liam, when we look at the performance, going into that, having the Dundee result behind you, and as Ian said, you know, we were back to that kind of free-flowing football. The shackles were indeed off, and we didn't really see it. We didn't really get time to see it. I mean, I think getting a man sent off can absolutely throw anybody under the bus. I mean, we've had it this season where we've overcome it against lesser opposition in Livingston, but you've seen it in Europe if you lose a man or a couple of men, as we have done this season. It's virtually impossible to go toe-to-toe with a well-drilled, organised side, with a couple of hidden weapons and the likes of Shankland in there. So I felt that the actual sending off was far more damaging than anything else that happened in the game, Liam. And I take what Ian says, and I'm glad that Brendan is embracing the siege mentality, because I think we need to do that. We need every margin we possibly can get between now and the end of the season. I don't see it as an excuse, though, because I think it's, you know, high time we started calling out some of these ludicrous decisions. Liam, what's your take on it? There's two sides to this.
Well, you know, it's a bizarre time we live in, because last week we had the BBC lecturing us about how to treat women, And this week we've got Rangers fans lecturing us about how to show respect for referees. I mean, it's just, you couldn't touch their neck with a blowtorch. It's just mental. The thing is, though, we're going to, we've decided we're going to appeal the red card, and I think that's good. That's definitely a step forward. And a lot of people are saying, "Oh, what are you wasting time greeting about it? It's done. It's over." Look, again, I don't like it, but Rangers started this when they threw the toys at the pram, when they got decisions given against them, which were actually legitimate decisions. They complained about VR, whatever it was. Well, if you look at it, actually the decision at the time was right. Our decisions are not that clear. I think Yang was not a sending off. I think I think both penalties in the game were soft, to be honest. And it's quite clear that we are being disadvantaged here by these poor decisions. And it only goes so far before you can say it's poor decisions. And, you actually think, well, wait a minute, is this dishonesty? Is it cheating? Well, I think it's wrong to ask that question, because we've reached a point now where it has to be considered. Especially when the guy who's given the decisions has been photographed in Rangers pubs and is known to favour them. It just wouldn't happen in a professional league, and this is the problem. It's like referees, you got to go one of two ways with them: either make them professional and insist on professionalism, or just scrap it altogether, because it's not working. The current system is not working. Simple as.
I think we've said it all along, really. The fact that they need to be full time. They need to have the full focus on the next game, and then obviously have far more time to reflect on performance, go through, like any professional, go through their own mistakes and improve on that, and improve on areas of the development and all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, Lawrence, we're not being paranoid here. The guy in question, the guy who was actually name-checked by Brendan, very unusually by Brendan Rodgers to name-check someone, he's really put himself in the firing line by going into Rangers boozers and drinking all that. I mean, it's highly unprofessional at the very, very least. But when you do that, you question whether or not he's been spoken to about that, that kind of conduct. Do you think the authorities have spoken to him about that? Because it seems to me that it's just, everybody just laughs it off.
Well, I think it comes down to saying, make them professional. I don't know if that make a difference, but what would make a difference is some kind of consequence management. What's the consequence of, that handball decisions? It's just, would Connor Goldson get that against them? We all know the answer, and this referee's certainly hasn't given similar instance against Connor Goldson. It's penalties. So what's the consequence of him making these decisions that continually favour one team? The SFA, we don't see, perhaps they don't see a problem with it. Maybe that's why there's no consequence. You're talking about an organisation that had to get rid of their president, Jim Farry, who, at the time alleged that a certain Sandy Bryson was also involved with the Cadete affair. Maybe the organisation itself was wrong. They had to get rid of their head of referees for an anti-Catholic email. Alan Morrison's, he's brought up the stats and said, look, there's a definite pattern here. And it looks like a pattern of assistance. Everyone laughs off it. Can't be biased. Can't possibly be that. Well, if it's not bias, what is it? How have you managed to rule out bias? You must have proof it's something else to rule out bias. Could be bias. It could just be, I don't know, a statistical anomaly that continually favours one team. But they don't even seem to want to investigate it. But they have decided on one thing. It's definitely not bias.
Well, that's the one thing that it definitely is, because it exists in all walk of life. That's the one thing that's more provable than anything else. It's
to say it's not, you must have evidence it's something else. How have you managed to rule that out?
When you talk about bias, I always remember reading an excellent article, Ian, way back in the day when 442 was a tremendous kind of unique magazine. It was almost like what your Mondials and all that have become. And there was a discussion with some kind of expert talking about how footballers pass to guys they like. And even at the top level in sport, your bias towards an individual overtakes the best decision, which is because one of the examples they used was Teddy Sheringham and Andy Cole didn't like each other and they were playing up top for Man United. And if he's in a better position, I'll pass it down there because I like him better. And that blew my mind when I read that. I was just thinking, how? But that was probably my introduction to unconscious bias, and it exists in all walks of life, in all arenas of employment. Why doesn't it exist in Scottish refereeing?
It's a funny one. I worked when I first left school. I went and did an apprenticeship, and I went and worked for my dad. My dad was the boss, and it was. We talk about unconscious bias or whatever. I had to work not just twice as hard, 3 times as hard, just to get the same treatment as everybody else. Because my dad was obviously subconsciously or consciously trying to prove that I was the same. He wasn't giving me any favourable treatment. Obviously I got a leg up by getting the opportunity, but it's true. We all have that. We all have unconscious bias or conscious bias. And I'm making a flippant point, which is a real point, really, about with my upbringing, with work and stuff like that. But it really was true. I had to work harder than everybody else just to get that parity. And I think when you have a refereeing system where people actually are known to be fans of a particular club,
mm-hmm.
I mean, how can you not be biased? And it's like, but it could go the other way. You could have a referee that supports Celtic, which comes down unfavorably on Celtic to try and prove that he's not biased, and the other way around. But it doesn't seem to happen that way. It just seems to happen that the bias seems to favour the teams that the so-called officials that do support a certain team, it favours them, So it's such a cesspit, really, when it comes down to it. But getting back to what I said in my first point, the first question, we still should have the credentials to get past these things. We had a penalty, and we should have put that away. It seems like we're crying about things a little bit, and it's like, and we are. It goes against you, and it's like, injustice. It flies in the face of all the things that we believe in. No, I would hate injustice to happen to any other team. I want to win in a fair league. I want to win the title, and I want to win it fairly. But it never seems to be a level playing field. So it is what it is. We do laugh about it. We laugh about it, and it's not a laughing matter, really. But we just got to live with it. It's the way it is.
I think it's right to call it out. I think Brendan has set that ball in motion, and the board, of course, have written their letter with their complaint, their concerns in relation to the way that VAR is being utilised in this country. So let's see what happens from that. We'll find out, I think, today regarding Yang's red card. But before I get stuck into where we are in this title race, Liam, there is stories developing in and around the future of Yuki Kobayashi, who's a player that you and I have spoken about extensively since he came to Scotland. And it looks as though Celtic have accepted a bid, although the club as yet, I believe, are unnamed. They're talking maybe Japan, maybe the MLS. Is there any word over in Japan? What's happening with that?
Nothing over here. And I'd be very surprised if he came over here now, because the J-League season's already started. J-League clubs tend to prefer to get players in before the season starts. I mean, there's nothing to say they can't sign a player now, but it's very unusual.
What about MLS? Do you think that would be a destination for Kobayashi?
That's probably more likely. He would get more time on the ball over there. It's less physical. It'd be better suited to his style of play if he wants to go on and develop. And,
this is a guy you rated. You rated him highly. Where did it all go wrong, do you think, for Kobayashi? Was it that one game? Was that the turning point, that game against Rangers where he was bullied and they defeated us? Obviously, we had already wrapped up the league. He gets that opportunity, didn't really grasp it, did he?
The thing is, last season we were flying, and it was at a point where any player who comes in doesn't just need to have a good game, they need to be outstanding to justify displacing anybody that was in that team already. And I don't think Kobayashi had a particularly bad run of games. I mean, he was found out at Ibrox, but so was half the team, if you remember. And unfortunately, that kind of blighted his copybook, and then from then on, he could never really recover from it. Again, I don't think he played badly. I just don't think he did anything outstanding. And that's what you have to do when you're a secondary squad player who comes into the team for whatever reason. You have to justify your place.
Yeah, you do. And again, it's one of these ones that goes into that the realms of the 4 transfer windows we keep talking about, the 4 transfer windows that were overseen by Mark Lowell as the head of recruitment. We'll have a wee chat about that because obviously there's been developments in the last week in relation to Mark Lowell. No one was surprised, Lawrence, when he was emptied, resigned, however it went, who knows. But the word was that he was already out the building some weeks before then, maybe even towards the end of the January window. Good move for the club in your view, Lawrence?
Yeah, I think so. The windows so far, we couldn't say they've been successful. Whether that's papering over the cracks, though, is it the strategy? If we're going to keep shopping in the £1-2 million market, is that the standard player we get? Kwon goes to St Mirren, looks decent player for St Mirren, but somebody of that value should be. And I think Mark Lowell, he's a Celtic fan, and he taken on a thankless task for him because everybody said you're only getting that job because of your dad. What would they have had to done to persuade the majority of the fan base otherwise? But we're saying, it's just pure nepotism. I don't know what he done at Man City or what his track record was. Certainly, over those 4 windows, there wasn't many successes at Celtic, or so far. Some of the players, Yang certainly looks to have improved since he's come back from the Asian Cup. He may go on and be a success. I think a lot of it's down to the strategy in the market we're shopping in. We needed Champions League ready players, and you're not going to get them for £1 or £2 million. The last 2 players that we bought at £6 million, Carter Vickers and Jota, that's the kind of standard that we needed in.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't imagine that the head of recruitment would decide how much he's spending. Maybe Celtic have decided £6 million is too much for a company that turns over about 80 million. Maybe they're saying that's too much for us to spend. Can't give the directors the pay rise if we spend that on a player.
The thing with that, Lawrence, right, and this actually leads us into what's been developing in the last wee while, but more so in the last 24 hours, in relation to Lila Bada. If Lila Bada goes to the MLS and the deal is apparently worth 10 million quid, I don't know if it's 8 million with add-ons, but the figure that's being floated at the moment is 10 million pounds. And you look at the recruitment this season alone and the profit we've made when it comes to recruitment, and the fact that we're 2 points behind in the league, we're already knocked out the League Cup. And it's a flip of a coin as to whether or not we're going to be able to retain this league. I think, when you're looking at the reasons behind why we seem to be shopping in the bargain basement for these guys, hoping that you find a nugget somewhere along the line, it would be impossible for those behind the scenes making these decisions to maintain their position at the club. Because if this doesn't go the way we all want it to go, we want to win the league, we want to be emboldened with all the different pressures and everything that's kind of conspiring against, let's just say, and we win the league within the next 9 games. And I'm the eternal optimist and still believe that we will. I don't know, I'm going to ask you guys before the end of the show if you agree with me. I do. I think there's going to be twists, there's going to be turns, but we're going to come out and we're going to win the league. Even if we do and we scrape it, it's still not been good enough, Lawrence. And a massive part of that is down to the recruitment. So if you're a football club, I've not actually done the maths yet, but I think we've made a fair profit when you consider 25 million minus the add-ons for Jota. You've got Carl
last year, it's 12 million. Last year we've made 12 million profit on recruitment.
Right, and we're sitting second in the league.
Yeah,
it's a scandal. It's a scandal, Lawrence.
I don't know if that's a recruitment manager that says, listen, you can only spend 2 million on a player. I think it goes higher up. We should be. You were looking at it and thinking, add 2 or 3 £6 million players. We could, certainly improve in the Champions League. Instead, we didn't do that. You'll probably say, we spent 20 million. Well, did you? You made a 12 million profit. Is that spending 20 million or is that putting 12 million in the bank? It's, and I think, they're shopping in the wrong market. Occasionally we'll get lucky. Yeah. But then you look, it leads to a bloated squad. You've got all these guys kicking about. We're paying them for doing nothing. And Brendan said he's too many people to work with. Too many people in the squad.
I'll tell you something, Lawrence, right? When you look at the bench, for example, and you consider how big the squad is and the amount of guys who are no longer even making the bench, it really brings home just how bloated the squad is. I mean, for example, has anyone heard if he's had an injury? He's not been on the bench for the last couple of weeks. There's a player that's just kind of fallen out of favour, not contributing to the first team. Lagerbielke's only on the bench due to the injury to Novroski. I mean, it is completely bloated. If, for example, and there's people always, when we start talking about recruitment, say £6 million doesn't guarantee a player. Right? Let's look about it differently then. Let's forget the transfer fees for a moment and talk about levels of quality. And the level of quality you're talking about, Lawrence, Carter Vickers and Jota. You know, when they come to the club, they're a different level of quality. And I'm pretty sure Alan Morrison and the guys on the Huddle Breakdown, for example, who were talking about the lack of quality in the summer window, could look at a player like Carter Vickers, could look at a player like Jota, look at the data and say, this guy's got the quality we need for the squad. We're not shopping in that market. And that's the problem. With that quality comes the fee. But let's just talk about the quality for a moment. The quality we're going for is a couple of levels below that. Kwon's shining for St Mirren, brilliant. But he needs to shine for Celtic. And there's a massive gulf between getting a game and shining for St Mirren and doing the same for Celtic, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's a percentage chances. You know, if you spend £6 million a player, do you think he's going to be one of the best players in Scotland? Probably. Whether or not, you know, he turns out being Champions League level, if you spend $1 million, do you think he's going to be one of the best players in Scotland? Who knows? You know, what's your hit rate with a £1 million player versus a £6 million player? You know, and I think, you know, if you get 50% right at $6 million, I think it'd be definitely something worth doing, because I think it looks like we get, I don't know, 1 in 9 or 1 in 10 right in the market we're shopping in just now. You know, and you can't be buying a full team to get 2 first teamers.
No.
Which is essentially what we're doing.
Yeah, it's 11 transfers.
We're buying players, right? And they're because they're project players and they're not first team ready. How can they get into the first team? You know, it's like it's almost like, at least if they go to St Mirren, if they're loaned out to another club, at least they've got a chance. You've got to start somewhere, you know. And we've had that success before, you know, with players being loaned out. Unless you're signing like a Chris Sutton or a Larson or somebody that's going to come straight into your team and improve it, and you spend 2 or 3 million and they're kind of just on the periphery. It's a difficult one, you know. I think I'm all for them sort of being loaned out. It's like you look at in companies where people are refused promotions because familiarity breeds contempt, you know. So they have to go and leave, and then sometimes they'll come back to the same company a few years later in a higher position. You know, it's like, why? They're the same person. They could have stayed within your organisation and gone through the ranks, but they've had to leave the company to go away to prove themselves almost and come back, you know. And it's because we're spread betting all the time. We're not. You know, we're not. It's a nightmare.
It is, and my take on it has not changed with regards to what's changed with recruitment between those 2 windows with Ange Postecoglou. 2 windows that Liam had a great knowledge of, at least 4 of the players, a much better knowledge than anybody else on Acsom for sure, coming from the Japanese league, Liam. And then, you know, the difference between those 2 windows and then the 4 windows that followed. Obviously, 2 of them were under Ange, 2 of them were under Brendan. And the difference is we had a head of recruitment called Mark Lovell, a head of scouting and recruitment. Now, Lawrence makes a good point. I mean, we'll try to be as balanced as possible. Who creates the remit for Mark Lovell? Is Mark Lovell shopping in the bargain basement because he's not allowed to go to that next level unless we bring the player in for a year like Paulo Bernardo? And if the player then proves that he's worth $6 million, which Paulo Bernardo hasn't yet proven, we won't be spending big money. I mean, yeah, we got our fingers burnt, Liam, with Ajeti and Barkas. But, you know, I always use Carter Vickers and Jota as the counter-argument to that. We spent a little bit more on those 2 players, and look at the quality we got from them. And the sell-on value, if you want to think corporate-wise, because I know that the Celtic board do.
I mean, the thing is, if you're shopping in that sort of 5 to 7 million bracket, you're going to get good players, right? More often than not. Not guaranteed, not at all. I mean, Ajeti being the example, right? But that sort of 5 to 7 million bracket, you'll get more good than bad. And we are operating a couple of tiers below that now. And you will occasionally get, like, you know, as somebody pointed out in the comments, you will get someone like Hatate for 1.3 million, which is an absolute steal, right? You get Kyogo for 2.7 million. But that's not the rule, that's the exception. Whereas if you're operating in the 5 to 7 million bracket, I would argue Yeti are the exception. Players that don't cut it. Because if you're paying that level of money, you've got someone who's already got some kind of proven track record.
Well, who have been the exceptions then for Celtic, right? So you've got the two we keep mentioning. Who else have we spraffed a lot of money on and it's not worked out? Raphael, we all know what happened with him. That was about 5 million. That was a shocker. I would probably throw in Ayo Berkovic into that equation. I think we paid about 6 million, 5.7 million for him. He was a waste of money.
Good start to his career.
A couple of goals against Rangers.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Remember the 7-0 game against Aberdeen, Lawrence?
Yeah.
Under Barnes. And we were electric that day. And it was Moravcik, Larson, Berkovic, Viduka. Yeah. It was unbelievable, right? But overall, I think he was a flop.
We got some decent money back from him, didn't we? He wasn't someone like Barkas where we had to write off everything.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Martin O'Neill about this one, and he said that he couldn't believe when he took over and he's, at training and he's watching the pre-season games, that Berkovic was on more money than Henrik Larsson. He said that was one of the first things I had to put right. Yeah. You can just imagine a player like that coming in, and he created a toxic atmosphere. I don't think he was particularly well liked. But our track record, the point I'm trying to make, Lawrence, our track record has been pretty good. I mean, I can think of 4. I mean, people might come up with £3.5 million players. I get it. We've spent a lot of money on that type of player. But when we go into the kind of £5 million market, at the higher market, our record's been pretty good, I think.
Yeah. But, if they're going to claim we spent 20 million, you could have got almost £4-6 million players and see if 2 of them had made the team better. Noticeably better. Would have been better off just now than we are. Yeah, that's the problem. You're looking, thinking, we're just not shopping the right market. It's saying that, Ian's talked about players going away and loan. I saw the Bosun Law update. They've moved him back into midfield at Fleetwood. It looks like that boy could be a success if he comes back and does that for us. What a midfield he's doing down there.
The question is for you, Lawrence, are you going to give Charlie Adam credit for that?
Sorry, Bosun Law?
Yeah.
Did you say? I'll give Bosun Law credit for that. He's playing outstanding.
Because Charlie's taking the credit, isn't he? Every time he gets interviewed, he's making the point that, since we moved him to midfield, I think it's down to the player. I've seen someone who's been watching him through the ranks, the Irish ranks, saying that, it was always obvious that this was where he should be playing. It worries me a wee bit, Ian, that Celtic haven't identified that, because, I mean, he was one of the youngsters that we bought for the B team, alongside, I think Joey Dawson came in the same window. We bought him from Scunthorpe. We bought Lowell from Watford. And if you're going to bring a player like that in, I think the development is you just loan him straight back out. Get him first team games. Don't play him in the Lowland League. Don't play him in the 5th tier of Scottish football. For me, at the moment, that's for your 18-year-olds who are coming through the ranks. If you bring a player like Lowell in, get him right out and play football. And I think he's proven that that's the best thing to do with guys like that.
Well, that's it. It's like it's a kind of a tiered system, Unfortunately, we're low down in the food chain. But you look at like the success stories we've had when we sold like big players, and if Riley goes for big money, we're giving them the 100 games or whatever, the 10,000 hours, metaphorically speaking, in a tougher league, which means they can go, and it's kind of a more surefire bet for a team coming in, to sign someone. So if we're signing these development players, I agree, get them right back out and get them playing competitive football. It's a funny one. I was watching that Tippy Tappy football podcast the day with Kenny Dalglish was on. I don't know if anyone saw it. And Dalglish made a couple of really good points, and one of them was about the way the stats sort of drive recruitment these days. It has for a long time. I don't know if you saw it, but it was such a perfectly succinct point. He was like, well, you might have a striker and all the stats are great, and these one-on-ones are this, that, and the other. He says, but unless you go and watch them, the stats won't tell you that every time he's through one-on-one, he could have squared past it and it could be a sure goal, but he's decided to have a shot. So that means his decision-making is rubbish, So it's like, you need players out and playing football, and not just relying on stats, no matter what age they're at. And I think we're doing that too much. We're relying, the Premier League do it, and it's like they talk about it till the cows come home.
Yeah.
But you need to see things with your own eyes, and you need to get people playing physical games against physical people, in the real world.
I've said it time and time again, every single time I meet any type of football person, be that someone who writes about it, to someone who plays, to managing, to coaching, to scouting. I'm a sponge. I try and find out as much as I possibly can about every aspect of recruitment, for example, youth development, the whole shebang. I'm absolutely fascinated by the process. And the way I kind of see it, Ian, is exactly what you've said there. I think data, and particularly when you're using it for recruitment, I think it's absolutely key. But it's the first tier for me. It's the first tier of filtering down what you require in a player, filtering it down to a shortlist. And once you've got that shortlist, and by the way, you need the best data systems and the best data analysts. Do we have them? Do we have the best in Scotland? Anywhere near the best in Britain? I'm not sure we do. And when you're spending £1 million on a guy like Kwon, nothing personal against the player, to loan him out 6 months later to St Mirren, I'd much rather invest that £1 million in staff, data analysts, data to get all that side of things right. And then once you've got your shortlist, Liam, I think that's when you bring in a scouting team. You go and you give them the eye test to differentiate between somebody on paper against somebody in real life. And then that report, all those reports are fed back into the gaffer, who ultimately should make the decision. I mean, that's the way that I see it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a problem with Celtic on the playing side and the corporate side. You know, I've went on a lot of rants about how poor their marketing has been in Japan, how I thought the Japan tour was shambolic in a lot of ways. But I think it's also a problem on the playing side because you don't have that corporate structure that you need. They're trying to do it on the cheap. You know, if every problem we have as a football club and as a business now is because we're trying to do it on the cheap. Celtic TV, try to do it on the cheap, right? Marketing abroad, done on the cheap. The whole Japan experiment, done on the cheap. And now player recruitment, trying to do it on the cheap. And we've been found out. Because I think the big problem was last summer, we thought, Rangers are mince, get Brendan Rodgers in, he'll win the league with pennies because he's done it before. And unfortunately, he's not been able to bring in the players that he wants for whatever reason. He has not got the best out of the players we have, which is on him. And it's because the structure behind the manager is just non-existent.
Is this the moment then, Lawrence, with regards to the change in that position at least? Is this the moment that Celtic should look at as an opportunity to then get that structure in place behind the scenes and get the best structure, in Scotland, but then you start to say, right, I want to have the best structure in British football? Because, I mean, data analysts, data systems, Celtic can afford the best, yet we either don't or we don't even bother having them. Because, I mean, Brendan Rodgers, with regards to Lagerbielke and Nawrocki, right, I'm going to use these two as examples because it's £7.5 million down the Swanee at the moment, particularly Lagerbielke. He's only sitting on the bench because we've got nobody else, right? I mean, the only other option would have been Kobayashi, but he's obviously on his way out. These players they should never be signed because the manager's not going to play them because they don't fit the manager's criteria in terms of what he wants from a defender. Now, just with those two examples, Lawrence, our system doesn't work. Is now the opportunity to tear that up and get a system that is the best in class? Because I think it is. I see it as an opportunity now to tear it up and start again.
Listen, it's an opportunity for change, but you could get the best data system in. But our strategy is still, we're only going to spend £1 or £2 million on a player. You know, I think
that needs to be part of the change.
Yeah, it's the ambition people have for the club. You know, and probably unrealistic. I expect Celtic to win every game in every league, and I suspect those at the top would be happy with winning 7 out of 10 leagues. And go, well, we're still the best in Scotland. For me, that's not success for Celtic, but perhaps it is for them. You know, I think the board's ambitions and desires for Celtic aren't the same as the fans. And some things were unrealistic. But tell you what wasn't unrealistic, having that amount of money and expecting to spend it on the team. You know, if a bad it goes, that's up to 70, nearly 80 million in the bank. That doesn't improve performances on the park. And, you know, and the chairman can say what he wants in his statement, but we understand it's not good to have money in the bank. And what did you do about it, apart from hold more money? Even in the winter transfer window, He's managed to turn the profit by selling David Turnbull.
Yep.
So you were getting into that, delaying. It looked like you were delaying your results. You knew you had a fortune in the bank. The team hadn't been playing as well as needed. And out of that transfer window, you still managed to turn a profit and not spend the money you had on improving the team. It's just baffling at times. You know, they can say what they want in their statements, and but it's the actions that you look at them. It's year on year they've been downgrading the team. They're happy to get humiliated in Europe. I don't know any Celtic fan it is. And the people that travel, they pay for their ticket.
Yeah.
They're sacrificing their holidays. These aren't like these guys get paid hundreds of thousands a year. They're using a substantial part of that annual allowance to go to these away games. A substantial part of their income to get served up with what? It's absolutely ridiculous. And there needs to be some kind of sea change. I don't think Dermot Desmond would like to be proved wrong in bringing Brendan back. So perhaps Matt Lowell moving on is part of a realisation at Dermot's level that, listen, something's not wrong. Something's not right with the club.
Yeah.
Something needs to change. And hopefully it doesn't take losing the league to affect that change.
Well,
hopefully they've realised now.
I hope you're right. I mean, there's three things I want to throw out, not just to the contributors today, but also those in the comment section. I'm going to come back to you in a moment. The first thing is, what should we call Lawrence's bar? As you can see, he's sitting in a bar. It's his own bar. It's not yet named. What should we call it? Secondly, I've already mentioned this week, I had the great privilege of sharing some time with Roy Aitken and Pat Bonner on Saturday night. And Roy asked the actual audience two questions, which I found really interesting. And at the end of the night, we asked them for their answers. The first one was, not just in a playing sense, not even just in the football department sense, who is the greatest ever Celt? Roy Aitken asked the crowd that. We've got some really interesting takes on it. And the second thing he asked them, going back to a point Lawrence made there, which made me remember what Roy said, what is your aspiration for Celtic? What do you think going into a new season you should expect as a Celtic fan? And obviously there was a different view within the audience. Let us know in the comment section, what do we call Lawrence's bar? I'm guessing it's the Celtic / Irish bar, Lawrence. Who is the greatest ever Celt? And what is your aspiration for Celtic? And I don't mean, I'm not going to cut it down to domestically, just overall, what is your aspiration? And I'm going to ask the guys as well. Now, here's some comments coming in. What happens? Aye, Celtic lovers, absolutely. And we've got Jungle Lion. Does anyone seriously think anything will come out of this? And that, of course, is referring to Celtic writing a letter of complaint / concern to the SFA, looking for clarity. Paddy Lavery. At the end of the day, folks, just blame Jerry Taylor. Jerry isn't here to defend himself, Paddy, but I will pass that on to our friend Jerry Taylor. Kevin Mullen. Afternoon, Acsom. It's us against the world. Let's do our talking on the pitch. No more slip-ups. Get this League One. No excuses. Well, I think we all want the same, Kevin, and I hope the contributors have been having a wee think. The first question, of course, what should we call Lawrence Connolly's bar? Ian Conroy. I know you're a very creative guy. You're an ideas guy, Ian, aren't you? Come on.
I was thinking about trying to think something witty. So give me to the end of the show, and I'll try and think. At the moment, it's not.
Brilliant. No, that's fine. That's fine. I can see you doodling away. What about the greatest ever Celt? It doesn't have to be a player, a manager, a coach. Just the greatest ever Celt. Who do you think that is?
I mean, Jinky's obviously the obvious one, or Larson, or Dalglish. But I suppose maybe Big Jock. Jock Stein was the catalyst for it all, really. In modern as a modern Celt. For me anyway. He was the springboard. So that's a big job.
Well, I mean, all the names you mentioned there were called out on the night, and of course, Pat Bonner was Jock Stein's last signing for Celtic officially. 1978, he signed, made his debut in 1979 on St Paddy's Day of all days. And obviously Sean Fallon gave Roy Aitken his debut, but Jock Stein was officially still the manager. He was recuperating from his car crash at the time. So they spoke about Jock in glowing terms. A few of the names that were thrown in from the crowd were Willie Maley, because he was there from the very start. And, he took us right into the periods of when you actually consider the length of time he was a manager. half a century. Unbelievable length of time he was at the club. Fergus McCann was shouted out, Fergus, for saving the club. And Pat Bonner told a brilliant story, right? Because he said Tommy Burns was the ultimate Celt, the greatest Celt of all time. He said, because if you look at the makeup of the club, what the club stands for, and you're talking community, you're talking faith, you're talking that whole thing, charity, he goes, Tommy Burns encapsulated that every single day. And they spoke about fallouts that they would have on the pitch, in the dressing room, all that fiery temperament, particularly in his younger days. But he says, if you want to look at an example of what it means to live and breathe Celtic, Pat Bonner, it was quite an emotional answer, actually, he gave. And he was speaking about the Sporting Lisbon game, where we lost the first leg and we brought them back to Celtic Park and we beat them 5-0. I wasn't at the game. My dad was there. Joseph Venglos was the Sporting Lisbon manager. We wore the lime green kits for the first time, I believe. Lawrence, first time, lime green. And we beat them 5-0. Pat Bonner's dad died that week, and I think Pat was 23 years of age. They're in the tunnel ready to go out, and Tommy Burns patted Pat on the back and says, we're going to win this for your dad tonight. And Pat Bonner, I mean, telling that story, the emotion was just flowing out of him. Unbelievable, right? And they went out and won 5-0. So it's one of the ones. I think all the names mentioned there's an argument for every single one of them to be the greatest ever Celt. What do you reckon, Liam?
I think just purely for doing what he did when he did, Fergus McCann. We might not even have a Celtic to talk about now if it wasn't for him. Because I certainly don't think if we had gone into liquidation in 1994, would there have been anything like the clamour to carry on as if nothing happened that happened with a certain other team when they went into liquidation. What
I find hilarious, and obviously I had a wee friendly dig at our friends from the other side of Glasgow yesterday, but is there such a thing? I mean, Ian, you've worked with Rangers fans, you're friends with Rangers fans. Banter's banter, but very, very quickly on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, banter just turns into grisly, toxic, horrible slagging. And you've just got to step away from it for a while. But this whole Pacific Shelf thing, I mean, are they bonkers to believe that liquidation is the same as changing from a private limited company to a public limited company? Are they that mental that they think that's the same thing? Anyway, I digress. Right, what about... What was that, Ian?
False equivalence, it's...
I know. It's frightening. It really is frightening. Liam, have you got a name for Lawrence's bar yet? I can't wait to see what the comments are.
I remember... I can't remember where, forgive me, but a long time ago, I was having a pint in a pub in Glasgow, and it was called the Kerry Inn. And I like that because the adjacent off-licence was called the Kerry Out.
I like it. What was the name of the bar you mentioned earlier, Lawrence? McConnell's?
Yeah, it was up McConnell's, Big Yogi's old bar. Poop, where I think Save Ourselves started, wasn't it?
I was just going to say that. I was going to tie all that in. That's where the first meeting happened with Brendan Sweeney and Matt McGlone and they guys, I think.
Yeah.
McConnell's. Right, so, all right.
Matt, up on Sunday to go on the walk. It was obviously 30 years since Fergus, and Matthew Martin is a guided tour of places in the city centre that had to do with the takeover.
Fantastic. Matthew's doing some great work, a real historian, a very nice guy as well. Met him a couple of times now. So, Lawrence, greatest ever Celt?
For me, Danny is a player, but going back to Matthew's walk, I'd say you mentioned like Fergus, John Glass, but probably James Kelly, because he's the guy that made us stand out as the Irish team and made sure that we didn't go bust and we continued and persuaded people to join us. So I suppose he is the rock upon which the club was founded. Everything was round about James Kelly. There would just have been another Irish team without him. We wouldn't have had the success. So I guess because he was first, he was just so influential. And yeah, I would go with James Kelly.
Good to see that we've still got a Kelly in the first team squad with young Daniel. Aldo, good to see you, Aldo. You're standing outside the gates of Ibrox there by the looks of it. If it's all a conspiracy, then why do English refs have to declare allegiance? I find it a very simple thing, that declaration of allegiance. Why not do it? I mean, if we're looking for transparency, just do it. It's simple.
AGSC came out and talked about, safety referees and all that. Well, actually, you've got a duty of care not to put them in such a position where an obvious bias can be alleged against them.
That's true. Yes.
Where are they doing their duty of care here? Never mind, the perception that the game should be fair. We should at least have that perception. But you put them in the firing line immediately. I mean, asking Rangers fans to referee Celtic and Rangers game, people are going to say they're biased. But society being what it is, there's going to be some flack with that. So what are the SFA doing to ensure that doesn't happen?
The duty of care is there. The thing is, as well, it's such an easy thing to put in place, but even for that reason, it would be worthwhile. AJSC Tech, unconscious bias, is the likely reason here, and I don't want it for Celtic either. No, neither do I want to win the league fair and square. We need transparency of referees' allegiances. You imagine going into the final game, final weekend of the season, Celtic and Rangers head-to-head, tied, goal difference, whatever it might be. It comes down to the last games of the season, and something like Sunday happens,
A referee has to be given that particular match at Ibrox. It's his last match, and he's a Rangers fan, and he wants it to be his last game to be refereeing it. That would never happen. That would just be surreal, wouldn't it? If it hadn't obviously happened in Scottish football before.
Exactly. You wouldn't believe it. You're right. G. Webster, every referee in the world will have a side when it comes to Celtic or Rangers. And Paul Byrne, it's not just ref bias, it's in your face, blatant cheating. Let's not dance around this. The only reason, Paul, I tend to go with the bias thing is it's something that I and anybody else can prove because it exists. Now, when you look at the cheating aspect of it, it's not something we can prove. Like within this discussion, we can't prove that. We could think it, but we can't prove it. But you can prove that the unconscious bias exists. And that's the big issue. And that's one thing I think that you can talk about with credibility. Nobody can start calling you a conspiracist and all that kind of stuff. The minute you mention cheating, even if you do believe it, I probably wouldn't say it because I don't think anybody can prove it unless you're in the inner corridors and the inner sanctum of the SFA towers. Henrik McLaughlin, did you read his interview just the other day, guys? He done an interview with The Guardian. It was very, very, I thought it was different because it wasn't just talking about the chip against Rangers, the goals he scored for Sweden. It was more to do with, his upbringing and the racism that existed and the difference between being a nobody and a somebody and how racism can disappear and all that kind of stuff. It was very interesting, and I would implore everybody to go and have a read at that. Exactly. If either scores, it's highly likely we don't lose that game. I'm going to come to you then, Ian, to talk about the impact of Ida. I think he's been brilliant since he came in. It looks as though Brendan is claiming him as one of his own signings. I'm pretty sure he would have been well aware of the player from his time down in England. Can we find a way, though, to get Ida and Kyogo on the same side? Because I just feel that we need the ability of Kyogo Furuhashi in the last 9 games of this league campaign. What he can give us is something no one else in this squad can give us when he's on his game.
I'd like to think so. I've been craving it myself. And I think with Ida coming in, we none of us knew anything about him really, but I said after I watched his interview, his first interview and his show reel, and I thought, okay. And then his first offerings, he's got the attributes to be a good player, but he's actually got the mentality and the will. For such a young guy, he looks like he's unshakable. He looks like he's got balls and he's got the bottle. And that can only, you need that at a team like Celtic. The expectation, it's not Norwich. It's not a mid-range English Premier League team. The expectations are you win every week, and he looks like he could carry a lot of that on his shoulders. Kyogo is a quiet assassin, and it's like, it's our wingers. It's like we've signed all these wingers, it's like when we beat Dundee, we clicked into gear and the wingers were playing their part. I think if we can get that kind of thing cooking, we can have both players in the team. You know, when he came on against Aberdeen, I thought he was a good foil for Kyogo. He really was. You know, when he was drifting into spaces and he was creating that bit of space for Kyogo, and Kyogo didn't score, but it created that space and that element that I thought, you know, we could build upon this. So I think, yeah, I'd like to see it, and we need to find a way to do it. At least try it. Sadly, we're in a title fight, you know, so it's like it would have been quite nice to sort of try it after the league was won, after, you know, the final few games of the season, but that's not going to happen. So maybe we've just got to do it by under circumstances, you know, and just fire them in, and that fires us the title.
Right. I mean, the reason I'm bringing it up is I've said before, Kyogo, for me, without him, you don't win the games against Rangers this season, Liam. You know, Kyogo Furuhashi, long before he signs for Celtic, you've seen him playing in different positions. And I'm looking at what Ida brings to the side and how that could be utilised against Rangers. Because let's be honest, other than the hiccups that we saw over the weekend, it's coming down to these two big games. I think there'll be a couple of points dropped here and there by both sides. But it's coming down to these two games. That's where it's going to be won and lost this season. And I love the physicality of Ida. I love the way he puts himself about. He leads a line. He can hold the ball up, bring other players into it. He's shown his aerial prowess, something that we didn't think he had. And up until the weekend, he can take a penalty. But on the flip side of that is, I don't want all of that at the loss of what Kyogo Furuhashi can bring to these types of games. He's shown his quality in these types of games, Liam. In your view, how do we get the two guys playing in the same team?
I think we go to a 3-5-2, because, you know, we could do with a little bit of extra reinforcement at the back as well. So 3-5-2. You've got Taylor and Johnson pushing up in support on the wings, and then you go with Ida and Kyogo up front together, and just go for it. I mean, I don't understand why, if you've got two proven goal scorers in the squad, why don't you play both of them? It doesn't make sense to play a formation that hasn't been working for most of the season when you could easily switch it up and accommodate our two most potent threats. And, you know, in terms of the overall picture of the league, I'll say the same thing I said last week. Well, slightly updated. Last week it was, you know, 10 games, win 9, draw 1, we win the league. Now it's 9 games, win 8, draw 1, we win the league. Can we do that? I think we can.
I think we can. I've liked what I've seen with Ida, Lawrence, and I think that he's proved quite a lot of doubters wrong as well. Not sure what's going to happen at the end of this short-term loan deal. You know, I think that kind of will hinge on the success of Sidney Van Hooijdonk at Norwich and what they decide to do with him. And there might be a knock-on effect. But then you're into a bidding war if he's done well with Celtic. I'm just looking at it at the moment, short-term. I think I'm only interested in him doing well for Celtic, because if he does well, the chances are we will get the 7 wins the 8 wins and a draw that Liam thinks we need, and we win the league. Do you think he's compatible alongside Kyogo?
Yeah, potentially. You know, I don't think I'd change the system. I don't know if we've got the personnel to play 3-5-2, but either, you know, Ida out wide and Kyogo through the middle, or Kyogo going wide and Ida through the middle. You know, I think you can play them as part of that 3. Ida, you know, I've heard, although it's not been announced, I've heard there's an option to buy. So, which, thank goodness, on his form, you know, fight. Because if he keeps scoring like that, it would pretty quickly put him out of reach, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well,
sorry, clarify out of the reach, out of what the board would be willing to spend.
Prepared to spend. Yeah, absolutely. I think that if we are indeed in the press conference between now and the end of this campaign, that's going to be the question, isn't it? It's going to be whether or not we've got an option to buy on Ida. Just ask the question, and I'm pretty sure Brennan Rodgers will answer it. Here we go. Giggsy the Poet, we know that's Kevin Graham. Celtic Cross Collective is his band. If the refs had to declare teams supported, then Motherwell Hamilton and Adrian St Mirren would gain a hell of a lot of fans. I mean, I suggested before, and again, it's not a difficult one. Lawrence, if you're a referee and you want a job, right, and I'm the head of the referee association, and I say, right, I want you to declare what team you support, and you say, I support Airdrie, right? And then I'll say, right, okay, I need you to tick this box if you've got no issue with us checking this information out again. Season ticket applications for teams in Scottish football, right? Because you are then overwriting the ability, the GDPR, the legislation. Okay, you're giving me permission to do it, and I can check if you've ever been a season ticket holder at Celtic Park, Motherwell, whatever. There it is. It's done. It's done and dusty. If you've lied, then that's an issue. But if you've said I support Celtic and it's proven that you do,
listen,
okay.
But referees lie in forms, mate. Now we know they only like Celtic matches. They're not going to do it in writing as well, are they?
I don't know if this is a name for your bar, but Jim Conlon says the face painter would be a good name. Stevie boy, there's a wee trend developing, Bar 2012, and there's quite a few others. So keep them coming, please. I'm pretty sure that. Oh yeah, Johnny Ryan, over 1,000 watching today. Only a couple of likes. Give us a big thumbs up, everybody watching. It helps with that old algorithm. So yeah, thank you all for the Crown and Liquidator. There is a trend developing here. The Urban Culture, that's a good name. The Urban Culture, well done. Keep them coming in the comment section. Who is the greatest ever Celt? Doesn't have to be a player. Name Lawrence Connolly's bar. And what are your aspirations as a Celtic fan for the club? Is it win the league every season? Is it do something in Europe? What does that look like? Let us know in the comment section. Please do. Paddy McCourt has been off the scene for a while. You might have been following his progress over the last couple of years. He's had a couple of difficult years, but we are bringing him back. Acsom's bringing him back to Glasgow, and we will be at Gracie's next month. The tickets for Paddy McCourt are on sale underneath this video link. Come along, have a great night with the Acsom troops, a wee bit of singing, a dance, and all that kind of stuff, and see the Derry Pelly, a cult icon indeed. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Thank you to Lawrence Conley, Liam Carrigan and Ian Conroy for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.